I'm still on a journey to become a full-time artist. This video, I just wanted to check out other advice on the internets. Basically, what can I do to go from part-time to full-time to become a professional? Do I need to market myself more? Is it just creating better artwork? I'm not necessarily a fine artist, so the video from Tim Packer that I'm going to watch, I've never seen this video before, but he's that way inclined. I do this kind of more tattoo, manga, comic book inspired artwork. So we'll see if it has any relevance and go from there. Okay, let's see what Tim Packer Art has to say about marketing.
There are thousands and thousands of artists out there trying to make a living by selling their art, and most of them are struggling.
Okay, so this is what I call the 99%ers of struggling artists, while you have the 1% of the artists who are just so good at what they do that they don't struggle.
And most of them are struggling because they're following a piece of advice that I hear over and over again that's come to be accepted as kind of universal wisdom. And I think it's actually the worst thing that they could be doing right now. Now, what is that? They're being told to treat their art like a business. And I'm sure...
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, I've heard that advice a lot. Like, oh, are you struggling to make money with your artwork? You need to think of it more like a business. Think of it more like a business. Think of making products that people want and then delivering on those products. Trouble is, you don't get into art because you want to be a business person. If I wanted to be a businessman, I would sell, I don't know, toothpaste or something, because art is quite a difficult sell. It's a high luxury sort of commodity, really, that most people ultimately don't need. But yeah, I agree. You don't want to be a businessman all your life or a business person. So what else could you do?
You've heard this before, and let me tell you, for most of you, treating your art like a business at this stage of your career is actually the very worst thing you could be doing. Stick around for this video. I'll explain why, and I'll tell you what I think you should be doing instead. So, treating your art like a business, what does that mean? Well, I see a lot of artists out there. They're hustling like crazy. They're doing tons and tons of art festivals. They've invested in a fancy website. They're posting
I designed my own website,
social media. They've got a fancy artist statement. Maybe they've invested a lot of money in a fancy display for their tent or their booth.
My convention display is not fancy.
They're not getting any sales. Why? Well, because they've overlooked the very first rule
What's the first rule of business?
And that is that you have to, at the start, have a viable product. Right? We've all heard that if you could create a better mousetrap,
so is that art not a viable
But no one's ever said if you can create a mediocre mousetrap that's kind of the same as all the others and you invest a ton of marketing into it, that you're going to make $1 million. And that's in effect what most artists are doing. They're producing work that's pretty good. That's pretty much the same as most of the other artists that are out there in terms of the desirability from the client's point of view. And then they're throwing all kinds of marketing on it, trying to make people buy their work instead of someone else's.
Okay, so in a sea of art, how do you sell art? Because this is the problem. So it's the toothpaste problem. You know, if you go to the supermarket, there's 50 brands of toothpaste. How do you decide the one to buy? The sort of advice or wisdom, so you know, is that you market it. You find a unique selling point or something that you can capitalize on that makes your toothpaste better than other people's, and then that is how you get the business. It's difficult though, because there are still 50 brands of toothpaste. If you were just the best brands, then you would just take 99% of all the revenue, and the others just wouldn't be able to compete unless you're then having to compete on cost. So,
well, let me tell you something. When people buy an artist's work, it's about the art. It's not about marketing. What you need to
that's true most of the time. Although some people, they just don't know what they want, and some people can be coerced or convinced that something is good even if it's not. Like, just think of luxury brands, people that would spend a lot of money, thousands and thousands of pounds for, you know, some shoes or a handbag or something. You know, that same bag, even if it's a high quality bag, you know, still made in China regardless, but yeah, it might be, you know, manufactured for $50 or something. And then depending on the marketing, the brand per se, that bag can then be worth, you know, $5,000. So marketing is key, you know, and there's just so many examples of it. You just have to look at branding and what it can do for you and go from there.
If you want to create a successful career as an artist, is you need to be able to consistently create work that gets the, oh my God, I love it, I have to have it reaction. And most of the work that's out there, quite frankly, it gets the, wow, this is nice. Maybe this would look good in our house. And when you're one of many artists getting that kind of reaction, the clients are going to go to the one that's the best value, and that's the cheapest. So the key is not to focus on more marketing or more business solutions. It's to focus on the art until you are getting that over-the-top reaction, that, oh my God, I love it, I have to have it, and people actually lining up at your booth wanting to buy your work.
Okay, so you've got to be consistent. You've got to consistently create artwork. You can't just create one good thing. I mean, you can't even create lots of good things. You need to create many amazing things. You need the wow, ooh reaction. And if you don't get that, then you're going to suffer.
Until that happens, you have an art problem. And there's no amount of business solutions that can fix an art problem. So how do we fix the art problem? Well, you need to be able to create work that stands above the work of the rest of your competition. You need to be able to create work that people want to buy more than almost all of the other artists. And how do we go about doing that? Well, first of all, you need to understand something.
Yeah, okay, so you need to become one of the 1%ers. How do you do that? I don't know, be born super talented, put in 50,000 hours of practice. So basically just wait until you're, I don't know, 50 years old and you've just caned it and you've just got really amazing, maybe. But no, I mean, I do agree that, you know, there's no dishonesty here. Yeah, the really good people are the people who are going to take people's money. So
something about the art world. And that's, there's not one unified art world. There's like a bunch of different art villages out there, each one with their different gatekeepers, different rules, and different actually decision makers.
It goes art world. So I think this is related more to fine art. So yeah, a lot of people within the fine art space, they sort of think differently from perhaps someone like me who sort of comes from more from sort of like a comic book tattooing style, working class artist background, I guess.
And the biggest problem that I see with a lot of artists is they confuse the world of academic art. That's the work that you see in public institutions. That's what's taught in a lot of universities where postmodernism dominates. That's where it's all about the artist meaning. Yeah. What was the meaning you were trying to inject into the piece? Often they don't want any skill. They don't value skill, craft, or beauty. These things are actually seen as actually less than.
It's interesting, isn't it, how in the la-di-da art space you get so many people that are like, I don't know, let's just throw some elephant shit on a canvas and put it in a gallery, or, you know, better yet, human shit, better yet, puke on it, or something just disgusting or weird, or, you know, just for the sake of creating a talking point. But obviously people don't want that in their homes. Some people might, but yeah, it's not the sort of artwork that I like, that most people like, but it does seem to be the sort of artwork that artists, you know, in the sort of typical sense of the word, are not maybe encouraged to do. I mean, he's sort of talking about being encouraged in sort of an academic sense, so maybe they are. I don't know. I never did a fine art degree, but yeah, people don't seem to appreciate sort of beauty and aesthetics quite so much, or they don't in those spaces, but I think the general public do.
Great art. And in this world, who determines great art is like critics, curators for galleries. And this work is created to be talked about, to provoke outrage or to provoke some sort of emotion, yeah. But it's not created with the intent that it's going to be hung in someone's home. No. Now, if you're trying to sell your art, you're in the village of commercial sales. That's art festivals, commercial art galleries, selling online or selling direct to clients. Yeah. In this world, the rules are very, very different.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the same space as if you're sort of a comic book artist and you're selling at conventions or Etsy or something like that, I guess.
First of all, despite 50 or 60 years of the academic kind of art intelligentsia pushing what I just talked about in the academic world, most of the art buying public still values all of the things that were very important in art since the Enlightenment. Things like skill, craft, beauty, mastery. Those are the things that people value if they're actually going to buy art to hang in their home. So how do we stand out in this village?
Well, the tricky thing as well is AI can mimic a lot of that. They can mimic the mastery. So how do you overcome that if you're, say, a digital artist, for example?
The very first thing you can do is work on mastering the skill. Things like drawing, things like composition, and then spending time in process mode, pushing your creativity until you can create work that shows mastery of technique, mastery of conceptual knowledge, and ideally with a unique voice that is instantly recognizable as being your work. And if you can do
so
that,
good work consistently, a USP, unique selling point, and that's the solution.
In a way that creates work that the public gets engaged with, where they go, oh my God, I love it, I have to have it, then actually earning a living as an artist becomes very easy.
Yeah, that little bit of the, oh my God, I have to have it, engaging with the public. Sometimes you can do something really good. Like you might, I don't know, you might like painting snail shells, and they might be the most hyper-realistic, amazing, well-executed snail shell canvases you can buy. But people don't really like snails. I mean, I'm sure that a lot of people, and perhaps enough people, would at least like this, the shell or the sort of fractal patterns or whatever. But generally, yeah, people don't like bugs and insects. So you've got to also pick your sort of niche or your subject matter quite carefully, as well as being able to produce amazing art, and as well as being able to make it consistent, and as well as having a very unique pull to it, I think.
Until or unless you can create work that consistently does this, it's virtually impossible. And even though I've had a very successful career and I'm very, very successful in business, I don't know how you can make a living as an artist when your work is just getting the, oh, that's nice, maybe that would look good over our couch kind of reaction. Because again, there's nothing that stands out about work that gets that kind of reaction. So instead of spending all your time posting on social media, doing more festivals, focusing on the business side of things, you should be back in your studio focusing on improving your art. And if you're doing festivals right now,
I think that's the same as, was it Neil Gaiman who did that speech, that Create Good Art speech that became popular for a bit. So yeah, that's the gist. Get to that, or get as close to the sort of the 1%ers as you can to make the good art, and that is the solution.
Getting any sales, I would say you should spend at least the next year just focusing on improving your art, and then test the waters again and do a festival and see what the response is. But until you're getting that over the top response, there's no kind of business solutions that are going to help you sell more of your art. You have an art problem, and until you fix that art problem, there's no business solution that can help you. Now, if you're interested in working with me in terms of fixing,
so yeah, you need that over the top solution, and this is another way as well, which, you know, you don't necessarily need to be the most sort of technically brilliant artist to make money. Like the amount of people I've seen that they still get that over the top reaction from a gimmick, from some sort of something unusual, something different. You know, maybe their artwork looks really good. It's like, oh, that's a really good picture. But what boosts it is the fact that it was made using matchsticks or bits of pasta, or I don't know, bits of cotton thread or something weird. I don't know. Maybe that's made up of snail shells or something. I don't know. So yeah, there's ways to do it. I think if you can present something different, unique, quirky that people haven't seen, then that's another way to get to where you want to get without necessarily needing the technical mastery of someone who might have been practicing for sort of 50,000 hours.
Problem, then I can help you. That's why I created my online art academy, and there's several different options that you could take if you want to work with me.
Trouble with these videos at the end, there's always a come to my art course academy. I don't mind people selling courses, you know, that's what us artists have to do, but yeah, it's just it's always a way, isn't it?
Highest level is actually my mastermind Hungry Artist community that involves weekly live Zoom calls where I'll critique work, I'll answer questions, offer coaching advice. That also includes all of the
what I would like to do is maybe just trial like 50 of these art coaching things, just generally see how they compare, and I would actually review them and see what I think, because the general gist is if you're passionate enough about what you want to do in life, most of the time you'll probably get there. And you don't necessarily need a mentor or whatever. I think you can be completely self-taught because you'll be so driven to teach yourself that you won't necessarily need someone else. But there are obviously times when you're kind of getting stuck and you kind of need a bit of a push in the right sort of direction. And we're not all just machines that can just keep going continuously. We keep having the motivation and the energy to do what we need to do. But I generally think, well, I'm just curious how many people out there would say, I'm really successful doing my art and I did it all off my own efforts, compared to the amount of people that said, yeah, I'm really successful at art, and I would never ever have done it if it wasn't for a course that I took online. Just curious.
Courses that I have on my Art Academy, or you could buy one of the individual packages of courses for less than $200, which will give you all of the tools you need to actually, first of all, solve that art problem and then work on the business. And at the very least, you could take my color and composition course that is going to have you creating better, stronger paintings within a day or two. So regardless of whether you work with me or want to work with me or not, I just can't stress enough that until your work is getting that over-the-top reaction, you have an art problem. It's pointless to spend hours, dollars, any sort of effort on marketing, because you cannot fix an art problem with business solutions. So if you're having trouble selling your work, the problem is your work.
So there we go. The problem is with your work. So, and I think, to be fair, that's good advice. I think that's true most of the time. I think the amount of people that aren't honest, and there are other courses that will be happy to take your money and won't just say to you, look, you're not at the level yet where you should be trying to market your artwork. Maybe you'll never be there. I mean, I suppose at the end of the day, it's up to people to make the decision as to whether or not they would go on a course to learn how to market if they're artists or whatever. But yeah, it's nice to hear someone just say, well, just get good at your art. And then I suppose at least then, if you're still not doing it, if you're still not figuring out how to actually make money as an artist, then you can start looking at the reasons why. Maybe you aren't attending shows, maybe you're not selling it online or selling it in the right places or at the right price point. So yeah, makes sense. So yeah, hope you got something out of that video, and I'll see you next time.